Hello everyone, and welcome to the CodeEd C++ tutorial on functions. We'll start out by opening up Xcode and creating a new Xcode project. Make sure that command line tool is selected under Mac OS and go ahead and click Next. We will call this program Functions. Make sure that C++ is the selected language. Click Next, decide where to save it, and click Create. Once Xcode generates your program, you can go ahead and click main.cpp in the project navigator. We'll just start by deleting the starter code and typing in our first two lines of any C++ program, which are #include iostream and using namespace std semicolon. Next, we'll type out our main function, so int main, open and close parentheses, open and close brackets, and return 0. Let's finally talk about the different components of this function. So we start out with int. This is the return type of the function, which means at the end of executing the function, you need to return an integer. 0 is such an integer, and an integer is just any whole number. Sometimes you'll see the main function without the return statement, and that's just because 0 is the default return for the main function. So next up we have main, which is just the title of the function, and the parentheses. In these parentheses are sometimes different parameters that can be passed into a function. However, in this main function, we don't quite have that. And then in the brackets are the lines of codes that should be executed. Let's go ahead and write another function. So let's call that void print and type in int printed. And let's see out printed followed by an end line. And we can go ahead and return nothing. So void is the return type, which basically means no return type. You can either see nothing at the end of those functions, and just when it finishes executing each line of the function, it will terminate, or you can type return, and that will designate the end of the function. If we go ahead and call print, let's give it any random number, so let's just say 8, and save that and run it, you will see in the console that the number 8 was printed. Now, if you want to create another function without a void, let's do that. So let's do int add, int num, and brackets. Basically, this means we will have an add function with one parameter of an integer passed in, and it will also return an integer. Because there's only one parameter passed in, let's return that num integer parameter plus 1. And that can be the default add function. So let's say we have int a equals, let's start with 1, and then we wanted to print a, and then we wanted to do a equals add a. This would then say that we want to save an integer a with the value of 1, and we then print that using our print function from before, so it will print out the number 1. And then we then want to call the add function with the current value of a. And the current value of a is 1. However, once it runs through here, num will be 1, and then this num will be 1, and then 1 plus 1 will equal 2. And 2 will then be returned from the add function, and a will then be equal to 2. Okay, so let's print out that updated value, give that a run, just so we can see how it works. As you can see, it prints 1, and then the add function will add 1, and it will print 2. If you wanted to make another add function that didn't just add 1, but perhaps any variable amount that you pass in, you could do another add function. And this function, as you can see, is the same as the previous add function, with the sole exception of the number and type of parameters. This is called function overloading, and it's where you can have multiple functions of the same name and the same return type, followed by different parameter inputs. So if you just call add with one integer parameter, then it will obviously call the add function with one integer parameter. However, if I call add int b equals add a, comma 2, with two integer parameters, the previous a variable and the number 2, then it will call this new add function, which has two integer parameters, and it will add a and the value 2. So if we then print that variable b, we will see that it outputs 4, because this previous print statement printed out 2, which means a is currently at a state of 2 on line 21, and then you add in 2 and 2, which then sets it equal to 4 and prints that out. Now, this is a really cool concept, but note that you can't only use integers and void as the return type. You can actually make functions with any return type. So, for example, we can do a string return type, get name, and let's just say we wanted to return Jared. That would then return Jared, and that's the return type of string. You could do Boolean and true or false, and then you can return true. Or, if you wanted, you could return false. Lastly, it's important to note that you can make double functions. So double divide int x and int y. If we were to just do return x divided by y, there's a problem here that I hope you can see by adding one more line. So if we ran another function of print with the divide function in there, giving in the parameters of 3 and 2, this should run the divide function passing in the integers 3 and 2, and when you divide 3 by 2, you get the number 1.5. So you would think that when you run this, you see 1.5. However, you only see 1, and this is because of the pure nature of integer versus double values. Integers always round to the lowest full number. So 2.7 would round to 2, 1.4 would round to 1, 0.6 would round to 0, and so on. However, there's a way to get around this. You do something called casting an integer. You can either do this by inserting the type that you want the integer to become in parentheses right before it, so that would then become double in parentheses with an x, or it would be double up in the parameter line with an x. Now, if you notice, 1 still is output. The reason for this is because we can only see it through the print function. And the print function takes in an integer parameter. So if we were to go ahead and change that to a double, which means that if 1.5 is passed in there, it won't automatically truncate to 1, but would rather leave the decimal place, we could run that and see that now 1.5 is printed. And that was the value of the divide function. Thanks for watching, and next time we'll dive deeper into C++.